People don't realize that the John C. Stennis Space Center is the second largest NASA facility next to the Kennedy Space Center in the NASA network. This is a picture of Kennedy Space Center's rocket assembly building. It's the largest building by volume in the world. The American space program had some distinct advantages in that the Kennedy launch facility was oceanside. This is a picture of me working at the Stennis Space Center in the control room back in the day. In the 60s, as rocket engines grew and became more powerful, and with the advent of the Saturn V rocket testing program that would take man to the moon, they needed a new test facility. They had been using Marshall Space Flight Center's existing test stands in Huntsville, Alabama. However, they were considered too small for the new rockets that were coming. As manufactured in eastern New Orleans, these rockets would be much, much louder. One of the reasons the American space program was so successful was they really believed in testing and testing the rocket engines. Thorough testing found the problems with components earlier on. This gave them a chance to correct errors and faults and avoid these during the actual launches and flights of the Apollo program. It doesn't make it perfect, but you get a lot closer, 98, 99% as compared to not. And that goes a long way to make a program safe. The new rocket test facility in Mississippi was selected just east of Slidell, Louisiana, just across the southern Mississippi border, and was connected by water to the intercoastal waterways. Therefore, the heavy lift rocket program could utilize intercoastal waterways through the U.S. throughout the South. This infrastructure was invaluable to the Apollo program. Most people don't realize that without it, they probably wouldn't have been as successful as they were. As rockets grew and grew, and the Saturn V rocket to carry man to the moon was so large, there was really no way to transport it over land easily. And Kennedy, being an oceanside complex, could easily receive things, large items shipped to them. And so they could barge these rockets around into Florida from the new Mississippi site. In this picture, you can see the business end of a Saturn V rocket being lifted off a barge by the huge crane facilities which were part of the new Mississippi rocket test stands. Here's another picture of a lift in progress. Here's a nice picture of the B1, B2 test stand. This stand was designed in the 60s to simultaneously fire all 5 F1 main engines on the Saturn V first stage. It's hard to imagine how big it is until you see it with your own eyes, but the NASA logo up there on the test stand, well, you can basically park 6 full-size coach buses inside the logo. In comparison, America's competitors, the Soviet Union, in the space race, really had no waterways or no infrastructure that could move heavy rockets. So this made it much more difficult for testing, especially when the rockets became very large as required to get man to the moon and couldn't easily be moved over land by the railroad system. Therefore, the Russians, the Soviets, adopted a different philosophy where basically what they were doing was building rockets in situ, one after another, at the rocket test site, launch site, and they had built several, and they weren't tested. They were basically built to the best of their abilities, and human life was a cheaper commodity, I guess, in Russia at the time, where they just kept launching them one after another, hoping that they would work properly, and if they didn't, many times there was catastrophes on the ground and vehicles that exploded in the launch site that were never even reported to the free world's press. And then the site quickly cleaned up, and another crew sent in and try and take off and blast off without a problem. It was really hit and miss. It was really crazy what they were doing. Oh, those crazy Russians. Here's another great picture of it from the intercoastal waterways. In the test cell where I worked, we used to go outside behind the blockhouse and have our lunch to get some fresh air, and there are waterways and tributaries throughout and drainage ditches, etc. And we had a resident alligator, and the alligator would eat the leftovers of our sandwiches. It was kind of funny to watch him. He'd climb out of the moat that he was in, and then he would put his head sideways because his tongue was so large in order to grab whatever sandwich pieces we could throw at him. He'd have to lift his head out of the water sideways and then let his tongue drop out the side of his mouth to kind of scoop up the sandwich on the shoreline and chomp it down. It was quite the sight to see. We didn't get too close, but it was a lot of fun. What was more fun was listening to the test firing of the RS-25 rocket engines that are used in the Space Launch System, the SLS, for the Artemis program. Wow, they made the ground shake, and you just felt like you were, oh, I don't know, a mosquito on a screen. I mean, you just seem so insignificant when they let those things rip. I mean, they're like 1,000,000 pounds of thrust. I mean, it's crazy to watch. Here's a small video. You really have to see it for yourself in real life to sense the power, the immense power, and it's just crazy. No words can describe it. You're just vibrating off your feet. And here he is, von Braun, the famous rocket pioneer, the father of the Saturn V moonshot rockets. I was lucky enough to get into his old office to see where he used to work. It was quite the humbling experience. Some of the old NASA engineers that worked there back in the day told me that when von Braun fired the 5 F1 Saturn V rocket engines simultaneously, they set off an earthquake almost in New Orleans, just south of Slidell. People actually thought it was an earthquake. The ground was shaking, the whole town was shaking, the chandeliers were shaking in the old French Quarter, and they were scared an earthquake was hitting them. They didn't understand what was going on not too far away at the Stennis Space Center. It was just that people were just freaked out. They were phoning the police department, burning the phone lines out in town. It was absolutely crazy. I think they only did that one time. It was more or less to verify that all 5 engines would fire, at the same time, and that the fuel systems could support 5 engines running all at once like that. Well, I think I'll leave it at that. There's some additional pictures here of myself, a space tourist, and working at the test stand. You can see the test stand that I worked at in some of these pictures here, and the pylon installed on the stand. There I am in the middle with a blue shirt on after docking the Rolls-Royce XWB on the stand. Thanks for watching.